Remember, communists eventually end up controlling the food. It's part of the Communist Manifesto. You've got to control agriculture and food. Hugo Chavez is the latest example of this. He's nationalizing the grocery stores. Why? Because the regular people can't get food. Why? Well, Hugo Chavez is the answer. But he says because they're artificially boosting prices and hoarding food from the people. Oh. So Hugo Chavez had no choice but to take them over. Obama and his wife are vilifying places like McDonald's and others and essentially blaming them for what? Putting us in a tight spot with health care because we're all fat and creating unhealthy Americans. That's what these food deserts do. That's what McDonald's does. And many people, you know, live in food deserts. So the solution is to control the supply of food and where it goes. They know better. A food desert, in case you don't know, is defined by the Obamas as, quote, an urban area where a significant share of the population lives more than 1 mile from a grocery store. They claim, as you probably heard Michelle Obama make, that the people in food deserts, mostly low-income areas, have no access to healthy food. Therefore, they get fat. Well, I'm going to show you something amazing. This is where they're spending your tax dollars. This is a government map. This is a map of America from the USDA.gov. They've mapped all the food deserts. And I would imagine that these areas here are the mostly poor areas of the country. Food shortages everywhere in America. We've got to do something quick. Michelle Obama, help! Before we let the government set the menu, let me set the record straight with the paper of record, the New York Times. Yes, the New York Times had something to say about food deserts. We showed you last night. Here it is. Such neighborhoods not only have more fast food restaurants and convenience stores than more affluent ones, but also more grocery stores and supermarkets and full-service restaurants, too. And there is no relationship between the type of food being sold in a neighborhood and obesity among its children and adolescents. None. That's from the New York Times. That's like Al Gore calling up Van Jones and saying, you know what, I think you're wrong about these green jobs. And by the way, we did a little digging to find out where these food deserts are here in Texas. Right now, my studio is in a food desert. I can walk down the street and hit I don't know how many restaurants right now. But we found a very important food desert right here. This is in Austin, Texas, a very progressive area of Texas. And this is a food desert, and it's really, this is quite shocking what we found in the middle of the USDA's food desert. Less than a mile into it is a Whole Foods market. Of course you can't get anything good there. In fact, it's not just a Whole Foods, this is their flagship store. This is the most hippie, vegan-loving, plant-eating, health-conscious place on planet Earth. And it's the flagship. So not only is the food desert claim a lie, even if it were true, it's not true. And if it were true, fixing it wouldn't solve anything. Who knew? Being fat is mostly due to how much food you shovel down, into that big pie hole right here. Turns out if you eat 42 pounds of arugula, you're still going to end up being a giant tub of lard. But the administration won't let the facts get in the way of a good chance to grab even more control over you. FYI, Obama is now spending $400 million a year to eradicate $500 million to get rid of this food desert right here with the flagship Whole Foods. Really? HUD Secretary Sean Donovan told just yesterday of how the president knows firsthand how hard it is to live in a food desert and just to find a fresh apple. Watch this as he talks about Obama.
Why has all this work been such a priority for the president and every one of us in the administration? Because he knows what you know. He knows what it's like to walk the halls of public housing because he's worked there. He knows what it's like to walk the streets of some of our city's poorest neighborhoods because he's lived there. What it's like to take a subway or a bus just to find a fresh piece of fruit in a grocery store. He knows what it's like to wonder whether you'll ever be able to afford a college education or decent health care. And he knows what it's like to be judged. not on your merits or your talent, but because of where you come from, what your name is, or even what you look like.
Oh, my goodness. He's a man of the people. And you can't do it on your own. He never found that fresh cup of fruit. He never left those circumstances. He's not the President of the United States now. He's not. He never made it. He never went to a good university. Never. He knows. So it's tough to find fresh fruit growing up in Chicago. How many times have you heard this story? Oh, I mean, if I heard it once, I've heard it once. I mean, it's quite an adventure. I'd like to take you on this right here. Here is Barack Obama right here, and this is just his trip for fruit. First, we have the, do we have any more light over here, Larry? To Chicago he's got here, and then he's got to get onto his bike over here, and then he's got to go to the subway terminal. So he's got to padlock his bike, he's got to get into the subways, and then he's got to spend a lot of time, several days, I think, just thinking, which bus do I take? Is this worthwhile? Should I do this? I mean, after hours deliberation. Should I kill Osama bin Laden or not? He doesn't know, although that's later in his life. That's right, he's on the search for fruit here. So he has to think about it. He decides, I'm going to get off the subway, I'm going to take the bus. He takes the blue line to the airport, where he flies to Ohio. Then he gets onto the, onto the Warren Buffett choo-choo train, where the choo-choo train, Amtrak, takes him on a long trip back to Chicago. But then he got to get back onto his bicycle, not the same bicycle. This is tough. It's tough to find fruit. He's got to take his bicycle. It's actually a unicycle this time, which is hard to ride. And he rides it back to the suburbs, where his house actually was, right next to Melons R Us, right here in his neighborhood. If I've heard that once, I've heard it a million times. We didn't need to know from the New York Times that this is bogus. It's common sense. What upscale area do you know has a food desert? Most of them, I think. I've never bought a house and said, man, it's really great, but I wish there was a big supermarket right across the street. No, they don't build them there. It's the exact opposite. The houses and the apartments that the poor can afford are always near the giant parking lots with the stores. How do I know? I lived in one. It was called Apple Hill. Apple Hill. Even though it didn't have any apples, I had to walk across the street to get the apple. My apartment was a food desert. If they actually cared about food deserts, here's what they'd do. They'd stop using union thugs to deny Walmarts from being built in poor sections of town. Here's another map. This is what I'd like to show you. This map is kind of the same thing. This is not my trip that I'm having to take and what you're taking to go find fruit. This is our trip to try to find the truth, okay? We start up here. We have to take a subway, and we come over here. We get off on this one, the Secret Service scandal stop. And we just kind of, we look at the cocaine lines. We look at all of the pictures of the hookers and everything else, and we stop there. But we have a real problem because it only stops a little bit, and we're trying to find the truth. And it takes us, the next stop is, of course, the race war. And that's really bad. You got to trudge off the subway line. You take a cab, and you get over here to the evil Ted Nugent. Now, this is a really dangerous section of town if you live in, like, the 14th century. Then you go here and you have to hoof it. Yeah, you're walking, man. You're walking through several streets just filled with prostitutes and birth control access and dangerous Tea Party members. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. I think after that we get to the truth, but if you'll see, this is a picture of the White House, and I'm not sure the truth lives there anymore.